Hello everyone and welcome back to Fractal 101. My name is Alex. Thank you so much for watching this video. What we're talking about today, recording and specifically reamping with our Fractal Audio FM3. Now there are a few tips and tricks that you're going to need to know, as this device specifically has fewer outputs than the FM9 or the Axe FX3. There are a few routing things, few ins and outs, and things you're going to need to know about operating in your DAW. Let's dive right in. For this tutorial, we have a very simple layout working for us. We have an input block, entirely stock settings, a set of amps ranging from clean to lead, running those into a pair of Mesa Boogie IRs. In parallel, running into a London plate reverb. We also have a dual delay pulled up in parallel, running straight to our output. I'm using a PRS SE Custom 24 for this video, so now that we have our presets queued up, it's time to pull up a new session within our DAW, or Digital Audio Workstation. I personally use Pro Tools, but these tips and tricks will work through any DAW. Now that our session setup window is up, we have a few parameters that we need to dial in. Most notably, the sample rate when using any Fractal device as an interface needs to be set to 48 kilohertz. If it's set lower than this at 44.1, it will be incompatible with your device and you won't be able to use that. So, if it's not already set up as your interface, you won't have this to default to. Make sure you're set to 48 kilohertz. I have the bit depth set to 24-bit. We're going to name this Reamp for record and reamp. With our new session window queued up, it's time to create some tracks to record to. Going to have one stereo and one mono guitar track. We're going to name those tracks Guitar A and Guitar A DI. Our DI track will always be in mono, whereas our processed guitar may be in stereo or mono depending on your circumstances and your presets. The next thing we need to do is set up our ins and outs accordingly to make sure they match our FM3. In the ins and out menu, we have our outputs, out 1 and 2, 3 and 4 in stereo format. This is correct, as is our input 1 and 2, 3 and 4. We're good to go. Now we need to assign the appropriate ins and outs to each of these tracks. Our process signal will go into inputs 1 and 2, the stereo block, and our DI will be coming in to input 3. So now it's time to record. We're going to arm those tracks, mute the input monitoring so we don't hear latency, and press record. And there you have it, 2 recorded tracks. If we did this correctly, we should hear the processed guitar on top, success, and on the bottom we will hear our DI. Now these steps are incredibly crucial to nailing a session, having these ins and outs set up. You may end up with 2 DIs if you have them routed the same, but you also may end up with 2 processed signals, meaning there is no potential for DI later, and therefore no reamping. Make sure you have the ins and outs set up before you get into the rough and tumble of your next session. So now that we have our processed guitar as well as our DI recorded, it's time to start reamping. We need to send this signal out to our FM3 and back into input 1 so we can reamp accordingly. First thing we're going to do is go to our output and select output 3 and 4, whatever that looks like in your DAW. But now that we're on output 3 and 4, we'll hit play and we hear no audio. This is normal. This is the first step. Don't be alarmed. This scared me very much the first time I did it on my FM3. Now you can either go to the front face in the setup window, or since you're plugged into the computer, you can pull up your editor. Go to Setup, go to Audio, input 1 and change the source from analog to USB channels 3 and 4. And you'll hear this. Success. Now that we know that everything is routed accordingly, it's time to reamp within our DAW. I've created a little loop here, just as you may see Rosh Roslin, Leon Todd, Cooper Carter create when working on tones. We're just creating a loop within the DAW and sending it out to our FM3. When we hit play, we can now go in to our editor, change any of the tones, parameters that we like, get something that we want, then record it back into Pro Tools. Here we go. So as you can see, we can twist and turn any parameters while doing this, tweak to our liking, and then once we're ready and we're set up, we can go ahead and reamp. For example, we can set everything as we had it before, but we have now bypassed our reverb. It's very common to send everything dry to the desk so you can use spatial effects within your DAW at the very end of the chain. It's nice to play with them and have a process signal where you have that, but maybe we want another option to have for the mix engineer and the people working in the studio. This is great for lead playing, especially when you're often using delays. Maybe they want another delay sound or something cleaner. Maybe you want to tweak the mix later. We now have that option. So now that we have our overdrive set up, we can now reamp that without our reverb. We're going to create a new playlist. We're going to call this Guitar A Dry. We're going to hit record. Now, as you can see, I still had my loop set up, so we're not going to get the end of the chain. Make sure you don't do that on your session. But for our purposes here, we can now hear our dry signal. Or have the option to have it wet. So now that we have a full grasp of reamping within our FM3, the possibilities are truly endless. You can do as we did here, have a wet version of your guitar and a dry version. You can also process these things separately, sending the dry signal just to a fully wet reverbed signal and blend that in on a separate track. If you really love the reverb and the delays that you have dialed in within your unit, and the mix engineer now has full control over that. Let's see what that looks like. So I've set up the session to now record just the wet printed signal. I'm taking the dry rhythm that we just reamped, sending to output 3. I've created a soul reamp verb preset. It's taken an input, no noise gate, straight into a rich hall verb, mixed to 100%. Make sure that the level is down, 20-25 dB, or it's going to get really hot really quick. You will clip the signal. It'll be horrible. So now that we have all of that routing set up, it's time to hit record. It's always nice to let your reverb tails extend beyond what you have recorded for the option of further ambience at the end. Well, that about does it for this video. I hope this was helpful and illuminating to you, and I hope that you can use these tips and tricks on your next session, whether you're in a studio, at a buddy's house or bandmates, or working on your next solo project. If you enjoyed this video, there are plenty more videos throughout the channel with other Fractal 101s, tutorials of tone, gear reviews, playthroughs, etc. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you all next time.